The night my husband abandoned me, I learned two things. First, the people who promise to protect you can become the ones who hurt you the most. Second, sometimes a stranger knows more about your life than you do. I didn't understand either lesson at the time. All I knew was that I was standing on the side of a lonely Pennsylvania road in the freezing rain, holding my 3-week-old son against my chest, while my husband's truck disappeared into the darkness. One moment he was there. The next he was gone. The red glow of his taillights vanished around a curve, leaving me alone with the wind, the rain, and the tiny baby depending on me for everything. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. My mind simply refused to accept what had happened. Ryan and I had argued before. Every married couple argues. At least, that's what I had always told myself. But this was different, because this time he hadn't just driven away from me. He had driven away from his son. The cold air cut through my sweatshirt as rain soaked my hair and clothes within minutes. Noah stirred beneath the blanket wrapped around him. Then he let out a small cry. The sound snapped me back to reality. I looked down at his tiny face. His eyes were closed. His cheeks were pink from the cold, and suddenly nothing else mattered. Not Ryan, not the argument, not my hurt feelings, only Noah. I pulled the blanket tighter around him and turned my body to block the wind. "It's okay," I whispered. My voice shook. "It's okay, baby." But I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. The road was nearly empty. A few distant streetlights glowed through the rain, but there were no houses nearby. No stores, no gas stations, nothing. Ryan had dropped me nearly 5 miles from town. I knew because we had driven this road dozens of times. He knew exactly how isolated it was. That thought made my stomach twist. The argument had started over something small. At least it seemed small at first. Money, again. Ever since Noah was born, Ryan had been tense and distracted. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter. Phone calls came at odd hours. And every time I asked what was wrong, he brushed me off. "Everything's fine." That was his favorite answer. Everything's fine, even when it clearly wasn't. Earlier that evening, I had seen a collection notice addressed to him. The amount was larger than anything I had ever seen attached to our finances. When I asked about it, he exploded. Not immediately. Ryan never exploded immediately. He simmered first. His jaw tightened. His eyes hardened. His voice grew colder. Then eventually he erupted. The entire drive had been filled with angry silence, until finally he pulled onto the shoulder. I still remembered the way he looked at me, not angry, not even frustrated, just exhausted, as if I had become some burden he couldn't carry anymore. "Get out," he said. I stared at him. "What? You heard me." Ryan gripped the steering wheel. "Get out of the truck." I honestly thought he was joking. Then he reached across me and shoved the passenger door open. Cold rain rushed inside. My heart started pounding. "Ryan, stop!" But he wasn't listening, or maybe he didn't care. "Take the baby and get out." The memory replayed itself over and over in my mind as I stood there in the rain. Each time it felt less real, like something from a nightmare. A nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I started walking. There didn't seem to be any other choice. Every step sank slightly into the muddy shoulder. The rain grew heavier. Noah whimpered again. Fear settled deeper into my chest. Not fear for myself. Fear for him. 3 weeks old, that's all. 3 weeks on Earth. And already he was learning how cruel people could be. I swallowed hard. My eyes burned. But I refused to cry. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed a plan. The problem was that I didn't have one. My phone was still inside Ryan's truck. So was my purse, my wallet, the diaper bag, everything. At first I thought he had forgotten. Then I realized he hadn't. He had watched me reach for my purse before he drove away. He knew exactly what he was doing. That realization hurt more than the cold because mistakes happen. But this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, a deliberate one. I had nowhere to go, no family waiting for me, no parents, no siblings, no childhood home. My mother died when I was very young. I never knew my father. Most of my childhood had been spent moving through foster homes and temporary placements. Some good, some terrible, all temporary. Maybe that's why I had fallen so hard for Ryan. He felt permanent, safe, like the family I had always wanted. Now that illusion was dissolving in front of me. A pair of headlights appeared behind me. My body immediately tensed. The vehicle approached slowly, too slowly. Instinctively, I stepped farther from the road. Every warning I'd ever heard echoed through my head. Woman alone, middle of the night, baby in her arms, vulnerable. The car slowed even more, then stopped. My heart hammered. For one terrifying moment I considered running. But where? The driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out. He looked to be somewhere in his 40s. Dark coat, dark hair touched with gray, serious expression. He didn't rush toward me. He didn't shout. He simply stood beside the vehicle as rain fell around him. "Ma'am," he called. His voice was calm. "Are you okay?" I said nothing. Every instinct told me to be careful. The man seemed to understand. He kept his distance. "I don't mean any harm." No response. I adjusted Noah's blanket. The stranger's eyes shifted toward the baby. Concern crossed his face. "How old is he?" Still I remained silent. Finally he spoke again. "Please." His voice softened. "It's freezing out here." The sincerity in his tone caught me off guard. For the first time I looked directly at him, and that's when everything changed. His gaze dropped to my neck. A small silver pendant had slipped free from beneath my sweatshirt. It wasn't valuable, just an old necklace that had belonged to my mother. I wore it every day. The moment he saw it, the color drained from his face. He looked stunned, as if he had seen something impossible, something he never expected to see again. The rain continued falling. Neither of us moved. Then he took a slow breath. "That necklace." His voice sounded different now, almost unsteady. "Where did you get it?" My grip tightened around Noah. "Why?" For a moment he didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the pendant. Finally he spoke. "Because I know that necklace." A chill moved through me, and it had nothing to do with the weather. "That's impossible." The stranger swallowed. "What was your mother's name?" Every alarm bell in my head started ringing. I should have walked away. I should have ignored him. But exhaustion and confusion have a way of lowering your defenses, and something in his expression felt painfully genuine. I hesitated, then answered. "Lena." The man's eyes widened. "Lena." He repeated the name like a prayer. Then he closed his eyes. For several seconds he simply stood there in the rain. When he opened them again, they were filled with emotion I couldn't understand. Shock, relief, disbelief, maybe all three. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and quietly said the words that would change everything. "My God." His voice broke. "I've been looking for you for 20 years. For a moment, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. The rain was pounding against the pavement, Noah was trembling in my arms, and my own body was so exhausted that nothing felt real anymore. Yet the stranger stood there staring at me as though I were someone he had spent years searching for. My heart raced. Every instinct told me to leave, but another part of me couldn't ignore the look in his eyes. It wasn't the look of a man trying to trick me. It was the look of someone who had just found something he thought was lost forever. "I don't know who you are," I said carefully, taking a step backward. "I know," he replied immediately, "and I understand why you're scared." He slowly raised his hands, keeping them visible. "My name is Daniel Mercer." The name meant nothing to me. "I was a friend of your mother's." I stared at him. The words felt impossible. Nobody ever talked about my mother, because nobody knew anything. Every foster family had given me a different version of the story. Some said she died in a car accident. Others said she disappeared. A few admitted they didn't know. But never once had anyone mentioned a friend named Daniel Mercer before I could ask another question. Noah let out a weak cry against my chest. Daniel's expression immediately shifted toward concern. "Your son needs warmth," he said softly. I hated that he was right. The baby's tiny face was cold despite the blanket. Rainwater had soaked through my clothes completely. My fingers felt numb. Daniel glanced toward his car. "The nearest hospital is less than 15 minutes away." I didn't answer. Trusting strangers wasn't something foster children learned easily. Trust was usually the first mistake. Daniel seemed to understand exactly what I was thinking. Without another word, he walked back to his car and opened the rear passenger door. Then he stepped away from it. The interior light illuminated the empty back seat. No hidden passengers, no surprises, just a folded blanket, a child safety seat, and warmth. He didn't pressure me, he simply waited. The decision was mine. I looked down at Noah. His tiny lips trembled. That settled it. Whatever risk Daniel represented, standing in the freezing rain was a greater one. Slowly, I approached the vehicle. Daniel remained where he was, giving me space, giving me control. It was such a small thing, but after years of people making decisions for me, it mattered. I climbed into the back seat and wrapped Noah in the dry blanket. The heat from the vents felt almost painful against my frozen skin. A few moments later, Daniel returned to the driver's seat and started the car. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The windshield wipers moved back and forth across the glass. The road stretched ahead through darkness and rain. I watched every movement Daniel made, the way he drove, the way he checked his mirrors, the way he never once looked back at me longer than necessary. He seemed careful, respectful, as though he understood exactly how strange this situation was. Finally, I broke the silence. "You said you knew my mother," Daniel nodded. "I did. How?" His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. For a moment I thought he might refuse to answer. Instead he sighed. "That's a long story. I've got time." A sad smile crossed his face. "Not tonight." Something about his tone made me look closer. He wasn't avoiding the question. He was struggling with it, as though the answer carried weight he wasn't sure how to share. The hospital lights appeared ahead in the distance. I felt relief wash through me. For the first time since Ryan abandoned us, I believed Noah was going to be okay. That realization nearly made me cry. The emergency department was busy despite the late hour. The moment nurses saw my soaked clothes and the newborn in my arms, they rushed us inside. Questions came quickly. How long had we been outside? Was the baby exposed to the cold? Did I have somewhere safe to stay? I answered as best I could. Doctors examined Noah first. Those 20 minutes felt longer than the entire night. I sat on the edge of a hospital bed watching every expression on the pediatric nurse's face. Every note she wrote, every reading she checked. Finally, she smiled. "He'll be fine." The relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. Tears filled my eyes. Noah was safe. That's all that mattered. For now. After they finished examining me, a nurse handed me a warm blanket and a cup of tea. I wrapped both hands around it. The heat felt wonderful. Exhaustion settled over me like a heavy weight. Everything that had happened suddenly crashed into my mind at once. Ryan, the road, the rain, the stranger, the necklace. 20 years. None of it made sense. An hour later, I stepped into the hallway carrying Noah. Daniel was sitting alone near a vending machine. He immediately stood when he saw us. "How is he?" "He's okay." For the first time that night, Daniel smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just enough to reveal how worried he had been. Then his expression became serious again. There was something he wanted to say. I could see it. Something important, something difficult. Finally, he looked directly at me. "Emily," he said quietly. I froze, my stomach tightened. I had never told him my name. The realization hit instantly. His eyes dropped toward the hospital bracelet on my wrist. "That's how I know," he said gently. I looked down and felt slightly foolish. But the tension remained, because there was still a question neither of us could ignore. Why had he spent 20 years looking for me? Daniel took a slow breath. Then he spoke words that made my blood run cold. "Your mother called me the night before she died." The hallway suddenly felt very quiet. Every sound around us seemed to disappear. I stared at him, unable to speak. Daniel's eyes filled with regret, the kind of regret that only survives when it has been carried for a very long time. "She asked me for help," he continued. "She was trying to leave someone." A chill moved through my chest. "What happened?" Daniel looked away for a moment, then back at me. "When I arrived," his voice cracked slightly. "I was too late." The words hung between us, heavy, painful, unfinished. And in that moment, standing beneath the harsh hospital lights with my sleeping son in my arms, I realized that the story of my mother's death might not be the story I had been told. Not even close. And somehow, the answers were finally beginning to find me. The hallway felt colder than it should have. I stood there holding Noah while Daniel's words echoed through my mind. "Your mother called me the night before she died." For years, my mother's death had been a closed chapter. A tragedy with no details. A blank space in my life that nobody seemed able or willing to explain. And now, suddenly, a stranger was standing in front of me claiming he had been part of her final hours. "What do you mean she called you?" I asked. Daniel looked down for a moment before answering. 20 years ago, your mother was trying to leave someone." My heart skipped. "Her husband?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." I felt my stomach tighten. The answer came too quickly, too easily, as though he already knew what connection I was making. He noticed it. "You remind me of her," he said quietly. "I never knew her." "I know." His eyes softened. "But the strength is the same." I looked away. After everything that had happened that night, I wasn't interested in compliments. I wanted answers. If she was trying to leave him, what happened? Daniel exhaled heavily. "The official report said she fell down a staircase." I frowned. "Official report?" He gave a bitter smile. "Official reports don't always tell the truth." The words settled heavily between us. For the first time, fear mixed with curiosity. "Are you saying she was murdered?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. That silence was answer enough. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I believe she was." A nurse pushed a cart past us. The ordinary hospital sounds suddenly felt distant, unreal. I stared at him. "You believe my mother's husband killed her?" Yes. My grip tightened around Noah. Then why wasn't he arrested? Daniel looked tired. Not physically tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying disappointment for decades. Because there wasn't enough proof. I didn't know what to say. The idea seemed impossible, yet something inside me reacted to it. A feeling I couldn't explain. Like a missing puzzle piece finally finding its place. Daniel continued. He had money, connections, lawyers, and my mother, she had almost nothing. The answer hurt more than I expected, maybe because it sounded familiar, too familiar. I thought about Ryan, the way he always controlled the finances, the way he dismissed my concerns, the way he decided what mattered and what didn't. I quickly pushed the thought away. Ryan wasn't that man, was he? Daniel noticed the expression on my face but said nothing. For a while we simply stood there. Then he spoke again. The night your mother called me, she told me she was leaving with you. My chest tightened. Me, you were only a few months old. I looked down at Noah sleeping peacefully in my arms. Truth. The words settled heavily between us. For the first time, fear mixed with curiosity. Are you saying she was murdered? Daniel didn't answer immediately. That silence was answer enough. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. I believe she was. A nurse pushed a cart past us. The ordinary hospital sounds suddenly felt distant, unreal. I stared at him. You believe my mother's husband killed her? Yes. My grip tightened around Noah. Then why wasn't he arrested? Daniel looked tired. Not physically tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying disappointment for decades. Because there wasn't enough proof. I didn't know what to say. The idea seemed impossible, yet something inside me reacted to it. A feeling I couldn't explain. Like a missing puzzle piece finally finding its place. Daniel continued. He had money, connections, lawyers, and my mother, she had almost nothing. The answer hurt more than I expected, maybe because it sounded familiar, too familiar. I thought about Ryan, the way he always controlled the finances, the way he dismissed my concerns, the way he decided what mattered and what didn't. I quickly pushed the thought away. Ryan wasn't that man, was he? Daniel noticed the expression on my face but said nothing. For a while we simply stood there. Then he spoke again. The night your mother called me, she told me she was leaving with you. My chest tightened. Me, you were only a few months old. I looked down at Noah sleeping peacefully in my arms. Suddenly I couldn't stop imagining my mother doing the same thing 20 years earlier. Holding me, protecting me, trying to escape. Daniel swallowed hard. She asked me to meet her. What happened? His eyes darkened. I was late. The words came out almost like a confession. I've spent 20 years wishing I had arrived sooner. For the first time, I understood the guilt I had seen in his face. This wasn't just a memory for him. It was a wound, one that had never healed. Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. I looked down. A nurse must have placed it with my belongings after finding it in emergency intake. The screen lit up with Ryan's name. 5 missed calls, then 6, then 7. A new text appeared. Where are you? Another arrived seconds later. Answer your phone. Then another, you're making this worse. I stared at the messages. Daniel noticed my expression. Ryan, I nodded. The screen lit up again. This time the message made my blood run cold. You embarrassed me tonight. Not, are you okay? Not. How's the baby? Not, I'm sorry. Instead, you embarrassed me. Daniel didn't ask to see the phone. He simply read my face. And somehow that felt worse, because I knew he understood exactly what was happening. A few minutes later, a social worker entered the waiting area. She introduced herself and sat beside me. Her questions were gentle but direct. Did I feel safe returning home? Did I have relatives nearby? Did I want to contact the police? Every question felt heavier than the last, especially the police, because reporting Ryan would make everything real. It would mean admitting what he had done. Admitting that my marriage wasn't what I thought it was. The social worker waited patiently. Finally, I whispered, I don't know. She nodded, as though she'd heard that answer hundreds of times before. Maybe she had. When she left, silence settled over us again. Daniel was the one who broke it. You don't have to decide tonight. I laughed softly. The sound surprised me. There wasn't anything funny about the situation. It was simply the laugh of someone who had run out of emotions. Then when do I decide? When you've had sleep. Sleep. The word almost sounded mythical. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept more than 2 hours at a time. Daniel looked at Noah, then back at me. I have a guest cottage. Immediately my guard went up, he noticed. Separate building, separate entrance, you'll have your own key. I remained silent. You can leave whenever you want. Still silent. Emily, you don't know me. At least he was honest. But your son needs a warm place tonight. I looked down at Noah. His tiny chest rose and fell beneath the blanket. Everything always came back to him. Every decision, every fear, every responsibility. Not me, him. The social worker returned a few minutes later. Daniel repeated the offer in front of her. She listened carefully, then looked directly at me. Not Daniel, me. Is that what you want? The choice was mine. For perhaps the first time in years, I thought about Ryan, about the road, about the rain, about the way he had driven away while I held our newborn son. Then I thought about what waited if I went back. More excuses, more apologies, more promises, more fear. Slowly I nodded. The social worker smiled gently. Then that's your answer. By the time we left the hospital, dawn was beginning to appear on the horizon. The rain had stopped. The sky was turning pale gray. Noah slept peacefully in the borrowed infant carrier beside me. The roads were almost empty. For the first few miles, neither Daniel nor I spoke. My body felt exhausted, but my mind wouldn't rest. Questions kept circling endlessly. Who exactly was Daniel Mercer? Why had he spent 20 years looking for me? And why did I have the strange feeling that my mother's story wasn't finished yet? As if somewhere in the past, buried beneath decades of secrets, was an answer that would change everything. Then Daniel suddenly spoke. His eyes remained on the road. There's one more thing. My stomach tightened. What? His jaw clenched. For a moment he seemed unsure whether to continue. Then he finally said it. The man your mother was running from. I waited. Daniel's voice became very quiet. He reminds me of your husband. The words hit harder than anything else that night, because deep down, I was already starting to fear he might be right. The rest of the drive passed in silence. Daniel's final words stayed with me the entire way. The man your mother was running from reminds me of your husband. I wanted to reject the comparison immediately. I wanted to tell myself it was ridiculous. Ryan wasn't perfect, but he wasn't a monster. At least that's what I had always believed. Yet every time I replayed the night in my head, I saw the same image. The passenger door flying open, the rain pouring inside, my newborn son in my arms, and Ryan driving away. No matter how many excuses I tried to make for him, that fact remained. Daniel's property sat several miles outside town, hidden behind rows of old maple trees and a long gravel driveway. As the BMW rolled to a stop, I stared at the house ahead. It wasn't the kind of place that screamed wealth. It was older, built from red brick with warm lights glowing through the downstairs windows. It looked lived in, comfortable, the kind of home people returned to at the end of difficult days. Daniel led me not to the main house, but to a small guest cottage behind it. The cottage was simple but welcoming. A small living room, one bedroom, a kitchenette, fresh towels folded neatly on the counter. The heat was already running. For the first time since Ryan abandoned us, I felt something I hadn't experienced in hours. Safety. Daniel placed a key on the kitchen table. This is yours, I looked at him. You don't know me. A faint smile touched his face. And you don't know me. Neither of us could argue with that. He stepped toward the door. If you need anything, call the house. Then he hesitated. Emily, yes, you and Noah are safe here. The words shouldn't have mattered as much as they did. But they did, because nobody had said them in a very long time. A moment later, he was gone. I locked the door behind him and stood there listening. Nothing, no footsteps, no attempts to come back inside, no pressure, no demands, just silence. The kind of silence that felt peaceful instead of threatening. I carried Noah into the bedroom and carefully laid him in the portable bassinet Daniel had somehow arranged before our arrival. For several minutes, I simply watched him sleep. His tiny fingers curled against the blanket. His breathing was soft and steady. The doctors were right. He was okay. A wave of relief crashed through me so suddenly that my knees nearly gave out. I sank into a nearby chair and cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. The way people cry when they've been holding everything together for too long. Eventually, exhaustion won. I fell asleep sitting beside Noah. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. Then reality returned. The road, the hospital, Daniel, Ryan, my phone. My heart immediately began racing. I reached for it on the bedside table. 17 missed calls, 9 text messages, every single one from Ryan. I opened the first. Where are you? The second. Answer your phone. The third. You're acting crazy. My stomach tightened. The fourth message arrived several hours later. I was angry, that's all. Then another. Stop making this into something it's not. I stared at the screen. Not one apology, not one question about Noah, not one expression of concern. Every message focused on himself, his anger, his embarrassment, his frustration. The realization unsettled me, because once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. There was a knock at the door around 10 o'clock. I opened it to find Daniel standing outside holding 2 paper bags. One contained groceries. The other contained baby supplies, diapers, wipes, formula, bottles, items I hadn't even realized we needed yet. You didn't have to do this, I said. Actually, I did. His answer caught me off guard. He stepped inside only after I invited him. Then he placed everything on the counter. I remember what newborns require. I raised an eyebrow. You have children? For a moment, something flickered across his face. Sadness, regret, maybe both. No. The answer ended there. I sensed there was more to the story but didn't push. Daniel handed me a cup of coffee, real coffee. Not hospital coffee. I nearly laughed from gratitude. After taking a sip, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me since dawn. How long were you looking for me? Daniel sat quietly for several seconds. Almost 20 years. The number felt impossible. Why? His eyes met mine. Because I made a promise. I waited. He continued. The night your mother called me, she was terrified. His voice grew distant, as though he were seeing the memory unfold in front of him. She told me if anything happened to her, I had to find you. I felt my throat tighten. Why you? Because I was the only person she trusted. The room fell silent. Outside, wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, my entire understanding of my past was beginning to shift. Daniel explained how he had searched after my mother's death. At first through official channels, then through private investigators, then through years of dead ends. Every time he thought he'd found me, records disappeared, addresses changed, foster placements moved, paperwork vanished. Eventually he lost the trail entirely. Until the night on the road, until the necklace, until me. Part of me wanted to believe him. Another part remained cautious. After all, this was still a stranger, a kind stranger, but a stranger nonetheless. As if sensing my hesitation, Daniel nodded. You don't owe me trust. The statement surprised me. Most people demanded trust. He simply acknowledged its absence. That made me trust him a little more. The afternoon passed quietly. For the first time in weeks, I rested. I fed Noah, changed him, held him while he slept. Normal things, simple things, things that felt extraordinary after the chaos of the previous night. Around 6 o'clock, my phone rang again. Ryan. I stared at the screen. This time I answered. The silence lasted less than a second. Where the hell are you? No greeting, no concern, just anger. I closed my eyes. Nowhere is safe. A pause, then Ryan spoke. Good, now come home. Not please, not I'm sorry. Just a command. Something inside me shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe clarity, maybe both. I'm not coming tonight. His temper ignited instantly. You can't keep my son from me. My son, not our son, my son. The wording struck me immediately. I glanced toward Noah sleeping nearby. A strange unease settled in my chest. Ryan continued talking, threatening, blaming, accusing. Eventually, I ended the call. My hands trembled afterward. Not because I was afraid. Because for the first time, I was beginning to hear him clearly, without excuses, without justifications, without love translating his behavior into something acceptable. That evening, after Noah fell asleep, I stepped outside onto the cottage porch. The air was cold but calm. Stars shone overhead. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future that didn't revolve around Ryan. The thought was terrifying and strangely freeing. A light glowed in the main house. Daniel was probably awake, probably carrying his own ghosts. I wondered how many secrets still remained untold. Then my phone buzzed once more. A new message, unknown number. I opened it. The blood drained from my face. The message contained only one sentence. Ask Daniel Mercer what really happened 20 years ago. No name, no explanation, nothing else. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, because suddenly I wasn't the only one hiding from the past. And for the first time, I realized Daniel might not be telling me everything. I must have read the message 20 times. Ask Daniel Mercer what really happened 20 years ago. The words refused to leave my mind. Who had sent it? How did they know where I was? And more importantly, why did they seem so certain that Daniel wasn't telling me the whole truth? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, questions crowded into my head. By morning, I had reached one conclusion. I needed answers. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today, after feeding Noah and settling him back to sleep, I walked to the main house. The sky was gray, and a cold wind moved through the trees. Daniel answered the door almost immediately. For a second, he seemed surprised to see me. Then his expression softened. "Good morning." I didn't return the smile. "We need to talk." Something in my voice told him this wasn't a casual conversation. He stepped aside and let me in. The house smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Sunlight filtered through large windows overlooking the property. It felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. I followed Daniel into his study. Shelves lined the walls, legal books, photographs, boxes of old files. The room looked like the workspace of a man who spent his life searching for answers. Daniel closed the door. "What happened?" Without saying a word, I handed him my phone. He read the message. For the first time since meeting him, I saw genuine alarm cross his face. Only for a moment, but it was there. "You know who sent it," I said. Daniel looked up. "No." I folded my arms. "Then why do you look worried?" He didn't answer immediately. That alone felt like an answer. Finally, he sighed. "Because there are people who would rather certain things stay buried." A chill moved through me. "What things?" Daniel pulled out a chair and sat down. Suddenly he looked older, more tired, like a man preparing to reopen wounds that had never healed. 20 years ago," he began, "your mother's death wasn't the only tragedy." I remained silent, listening. "After Lena died, there was an investigation. You told me that. I didn't tell you everything." My stomach tightened. There it was. The confirmation I had been expecting. He hadn't told me everything. Daniel leaned forward. 3 days before her death, Lena gave me something. "What?" "A file." I frowned. "A file," he nodded. "Documents." The word hung in the air. "What kind of documents?" His jaw tightened. "The kind that could destroy powerful people." For several seconds, I simply stared at him. Nothing about this conversation was going where I expected. "Powerful people," Daniel nodded. "Men involved in illegal business deals." The room suddenly felt smaller. "What does that have to do with my mother?" "She found evidence." My pulse quickened. "Evidence of what?" Daniel hesitated. "Fraud, money laundering, corruption." I blinked. My mother had worked at a legal aid office. That much Daniel had already told me. But this sounded like something from a crime novel. What if our meeting years ago hadn't been as random as I believed? The thought seemed absurd, impossible. Yet the evidence sitting in front of me made it harder to dismiss. I remembered our first date. The way Ryan seemed unusually interested in my past. The way he asked questions nobody else ever asked. Questions about foster care. Questions about my mother. Questions about whether I had inherited anything. At the time, I thought he was simply trying to know me better. Now I wasn't so sure. A loud knock suddenly echoed through the house. Both Daniel and I looked toward the door. Another knock followed. Harder this time. Urgent. Daniel stood. His expression instantly changed. Something was wrong, very wrong. The knocking came again. Then a voice, a man's voice, angry, demanding. Even before I recognized it, dread filled my chest. Because somewhere deep inside, I already knew who it was. Ryan, and from the sound of his voice, he had finally found me. The knocking continued. Loud, aggressive. The kind of knocking that wasn't really knocking at all. It was a demand, a warning, a declaration that whoever stood on the other side of the door had no intention of leaving quietly. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Noah stirred in his carrier and let out a soft cry. The sound broke the tension. Daniel looked toward me. "Take Noah and stay here." My heart was already racing. "Daniel, please." There was something in his voice that stopped me, not fear, concern. The kind of concern that comes from someone who has seen situations spiral out of control before. Another bang echoed through the house. Then Ryan's voice. "Emily, I know you're in there." Every muscle in my body tightened. I hadn't told him where I was. I hadn't told anyone, which meant he had found me another way. That realization frightened me more than his anger. Daniel walked toward the front of the house. Against my better judgment, I followed several steps behind. By the time we reached the foyer, Ryan was visible through the glass panels beside the front door. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his face looked exhausted, but his eyes were furious. Daniel opened the door only halfway. "Can I help you?" Ryan immediately tried to push past him. "Move." Daniel didn't budge. "This is private property. My wife is inside." The word wife sounded less like affection and more like ownership. Ryan's gaze shifted. The moment he saw me standing in the hallway, relief flashed across his face. But it vanished almost instantly, replaced by irritation. "There you are." Not "thank God you're okay," not "how's Noah," just irritation, as though I had inconvenienced him. "Emily, let's go." I stared at him. After everything that had happened, those were the first words out of his mouth. Let's go, no apology, no explanation, nothing. Ryan noticed my expression and sighed dramatically. "Can we stop this?" The comment stunned me. Stop this. As if abandoning a woman and a newborn on the side of a road was a misunderstanding. As if the entire nightmare had been some argument that got slightly out of hand. "You left us," I said quietly. Ryan rubbed his forehead. I was angry. "You left your son." His jaw tightened. "I came back." The lie was so immediate and so effortless that for a second I almost questioned my own memory. Then anger replaced disbelief. "No, you didn't." Ryan looked away. Only briefly, but I saw it. The crack in the story. The recognition that I wasn't going to make excuses for him this time. Daniel remained silent, watching, observing. Ryan finally looked toward him. "And who exactly are you?" The question wasn't friendly. Daniel met his gaze. "Daniel Mercer." For the first time, something unexpected happened. Ryan froze, only for a second, but Daniel saw it. So did I. A strange look passed across Ryan's face. Recognition. The moment disappeared almost immediately, yet it had happened. My pulse quickened. Ryan knew that name, or at least he had heard it before. Daniel noticed too. "I take it you've heard of me." Ryan recovered quickly. "No." It came too fast, too rehearsed. Daniel didn't argue. Instead, he stepped aside slightly. "Emily's free to make her own choices." Ryan laughed, a short, bitter laugh. "You think you know what's going on here?" Daniel's expression never changed. "I know enough." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The secret Ryan had just exposed was only the beginning. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Ryan's words seemed to hang in the air like a storm cloud. "She left behind millions." I stared at him, convinced I had misunderstood. Millions? The idea was absurd. My entire childhood had been spent moving between foster homes, donated clothes, and temporary bedrooms. Nobody with millions of dollars waiting for them grows up wondering where their next placement will be. "That's not possible," I whispered. Ryan laughed softly, not because anything was funny, because he thought he had finally gained control of the conversation. "That's what I said when I first found out." My heart skipped. First found out? Ryan immediately realized his mistake, but it was too late. I caught it. Daniel caught it. The truth was beginning to leak through the cracks. "You knew," I said. Ryan looked away. "Ryan," my voice sharpened. "How long have you known?" He remained silent. That silence told me everything. Not only had he had known for a long time. The realization felt like being punched in the chest. Suddenly dozens of memories resurfaced. Questions he asked during our dating years. Conversations about my childhood. his strange interest whenever my mother's name came up, the public records searches Daniel mentioned, the hidden financial problems, the debt, the gambling, the lies. One by one, the pieces began falling into place, and I hated the picture they were creating. Daniel finally spoke. "Tell her the truth." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You first." The two men stared at each other. Years of history seemed to exist between them. History I still didn't understand. Then Daniel turned toward me. His expression was calm, resigned, like a man who knew the secret had finally reached the point where it could no longer stay hidden. "The money is real." The words hit me harder than Ryan's revelation, because Daniel wasn't trying to manipulate me. If he said it was real, it probably was. I sank into a nearby chair. My legs suddenly felt weak. "No," Daniel nodded slowly. "Your mother discovered financial crimes involving several business partners." I remembered the documents, the names, the transactions, the records hidden inside the old folder. Those documents helped expose millions of dollars that had been concealed. I struggled to process what he was saying. "What does that have to do with me?" Daniel took a slow breath. "Before she died, your mother transferred ownership of certain assets into a protected trust." The room felt impossibly quiet. "A trust?" "Yes." "Why?" His answer came immediately. "To protect you." Tears stung my eyes. For years I had believed my mother left nothing behind. No message, no plan, no protection. Now I was learning that she had spent her final days trying to secure my future, trying to keep me safe, even after she was gone. The thought broke something inside me. Ryan suddenly spoke. "And do you want to tell her the rest?" Daniel's face hardened, but he nodded. "After Lena died, the trust became legally frozen." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means nobody could access it." Nobody, Ryan laughed bitterly. "Except eventually someone could." I looked at him. His eyes gleamed with frustration. The frustration of someone who had spent years chasing something they couldn't reach. And in that moment, I finally understood. The money wasn't what shocked me. Ryan's reaction was, because he wasn't angry about losing me. He wasn't angry about the marriage. He was angry about losing access to what he believed belonged to him. A cold realization settled over me. The road. The abandonment, the manipulation, the apologies, the pressure. All of it suddenly looked different. Not like a husband trying to save a marriage, like a man desperate to recover an investment. I felt sick. Ryan saw the understanding appear on my face. Immediately he became defensive. "It wasn't like that." I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, because the lie felt so obvious now. "Then explain." His mouth opened, then closed. No explanation came because there wasn't one. Daniel remained silent, allowing Ryan every opportunity to tell the truth. Ryan finally looked at me. For a brief moment I saw genuine emotion. Not love, not regret, fear, the fear of being exposed. "You don't understand." "No," I said quietly. "I finally do." The words landed harder than any accusation. Ryan's shoulders slumped slightly, as though some final illusion had collapsed. Then something unexpected happened. He stopped pretending. The mask slipped. Years of charm and excuses disappeared, and the man standing in front of me suddenly looked like a stranger. "You think you're innocent?" he asked Daniel. Daniel didn't respond. Ryan pointed toward him. "Tell her why you really kept the trust hidden." My stomach tightened. Again, another secret, another missing piece. I looked at Daniel. This time he didn't avoid my eyes. "I kept it hidden because people were looking for it." The answer surprised me. "People," Daniel nodded. "The same people connected to the records your mother uncovered." A chill ran through me. I suddenly remembered the anonymous text message. "Ask Daniel what really happened 20 years ago." The warning made more sense now. Daniel continued. "For years I believed releasing information about the trust would put you in danger." Ryan scoffed. "Danger?" Daniel's voice sharpened. "Two people connected to those financial records died under suspicious circumstances." The room fell silent. Even Ryan stopped talking. Because unlike everything else, this wasn't speculation. This was something real, something frightening. I stared at Daniel. "You're serious?" "Yes." My pulse quickened. The story had grown far beyond anything I imagined. This wasn't just about money anymore, or marriage, or family. It was about secrets that had survived for 2 decades. Secrets people might have killed to protect. Then Daniel reached into a drawer and removed a thick envelope. He placed it gently on the table. The sight of it instantly changed Ryan's expression. His eyes locked onto it. Hungry, desperate. Daniel noticed. So did I. What is that? I asked. Daniel looked directly at me. The final letter your mother wrote before she died. The world seemed to stop. For 20 years I had wanted something, anything, a photograph, a note, a message, proof that my mother had loved me, and now it was sitting on the table between us. My hands trembled. Slowly I reached for the envelope. Across the room, Ryan stared at it like it contained a winning lottery ticket. But I wasn't thinking about money. I wasn't thinking about secrets. I wasn't even thinking about Ryan. I was thinking about my mother, about the woman whose voice I couldn't remember, the woman whose face existed only in faded photographs, the woman who had spent her final days trying to protect a daughter she would never see grow up, a daughter who was now holding her last words. And somehow I knew those words were about to change everything. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 20 years. 20 years of questions. 20 years of wondering whether my mother had loved me, whether she had thought about me in her final moments, whether I had mattered. And now, the answers were waiting inside a few folded sheets of paper. The handwriting was slightly uneven but unmistakably personal. Daniel quietly stepped back. Even Ryan said nothing. The room seemed to disappear around me. All that remained was the letter. I unfolded the first page. The words blurred through tears. Then I began to read. My dearest Emily, if you are reading this, then life did not give me the chance to stay with you. A sob caught in my throat. I pressed a hand over my mouth and kept reading. There is not a single day that I have held you in my arms without thanking God for you. You are the greatest gift I have ever known. Tears rolled down my face. For the first time in my life, I heard my mother's voice. Not through stories. Not through records. Through her own words. If anything happens to me, please never believe it was because I stopped fighting for you. Every choice I made was to protect you. The room was silent except for the sound of Noah sleeping nearby. I continued reading. The money people may one day talk about is not important. If you ever find it, use it to build a life filled with kindness. Money can protect a home, but only love can make one. I paused. My chest ached. Then I reached the final page. That was where everything changed. Daniel Mercer is the only person I trust with your future. If he found you, then he kept his promise. I slowly lowered the letter. Across the room, Daniel closed his eyes. For a second, I saw the weight he had carried for 2 decades. Not because of money, not because of guilt, because of a promise. A promise he had never stopped trying to keep. When he opened his eyes again, they were filled with tears. I failed her. I shook my head. No, my voice broke. You spent 20 years looking for me. The guilt on his face softened. A little, not completely, maybe it never would, but a little. Then I turned toward Ryan. The moment felt entirely different now. The confusion was gone. The doubt was gone. All that remained was clarity. Ryan looked uncomfortable beneath my gaze. For the first time since I'd known him, he seemed unsure of himself. You knew, didn't you? He didn't answer. You knew about the trust. Silence. You married me knowing who I was. Still silence. That was answer enough. The truth settled over the room. Ryan hadn't fallen in love with a mystery. He had fallen in love with an opportunity. Maybe there had been genuine feelings once. Maybe not. But somewhere along the way, greed had become more important than love. And greed had destroyed everything. You searched for information about my mother. His shoulders slumped. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. His eyes dropped to the floor. For the first time, he had nothing left to manipulate, nothing left to twist, no story left to sell, only truth. And truth was a language he had never spoken very well. Daniel quietly handed me another folder. Inside were financial records, legal documents, and court filings. Everything had already been prepared. The trust existed. The assets existed. And legally, they belonged to me. The amount was significant, far more money than I had ever imagined, enough to change a life, enough to tempt the wrong people. enough to explain Ryan's obsession. But strangely, I felt almost nothing when I looked at the numbers. Because the most valuable thing I had gained wasn't money. It was the truth. For the first time in my life, I knew where I came from. I knew who my mother was. I knew she had loved me, and that was worth more than any inheritance. The weeks that followed were difficult. I filed for divorce. Ryan fought it at first. Then he didn't. Maybe because he knew the evidence against him was overwhelming. Maybe because he finally realized there was nothing left to gain. Either way, the marriage ended. Not with a dramatic courtroom battle. Not with revenge, just with a signature. A final page. The end of a chapter that should have ended long before. As for the trust, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I kept enough to provide stability for Noah and me. A safe home, education, security. The things my mother had wanted for me. Then I used a large portion of the rest to establish a foundation supporting children aging out of foster care. Children like the girl I once was. Children who needed someone to believe they mattered. Because I knew exactly what it felt like to grow up thinking nobody was coming. Daniel helped me create it. Not because he wanted recognition. Because he wanted to honor Lena. And together, we did. Over time, Daniel became family. Not officially, not through paperwork, but in every way that mattered. He attended Noah's first birthday, his first steps, his first day of school, the moments grandparents are usually there for, the moments life almost denied us. One spring afternoon, several years later, Noah and I visited my mother's grave. The sky was clear. The air smelled of fresh grass and flowers. Noah was old enough to ask questions by then. He looked down at the headstone, then up at me. Was she nice? I smiled. The answer came easily. Very. Did she love you? Tears filled my eyes, not sad tears, the kind that come from healing, the kind that come from finally knowing. I knelt beside him. More than anything. Noah nodded thoughtfully, then placed a small wildflower beside the grave. We stood there together for a long moment. 3 generations connected by a love that had survived time, loss, and secrets. As we walked back toward the car, I looked once more at the headstone. For years I had believed my story began with abandonment. A mother lost. A childhood spent in foster care. A husband who left me on the side of a road. But I understood now that those weren't beginnings. They were chapters, painful chapters, important chapters, but not the whole story, because my real story was about survival, about truth, about the people who choose to love you even when life gives them every reason not to. And sometimes, when I think back to that freezing night in the rain, I realize how close everything came to being different. One road, one stranger, one promise kept after 20 years. A promise that brought me home to a family I never knew I had, and gave my son a future his grandmother had fought to protect long before he was ever born. The night my husband abandoned me felt like the end of my life. In reality, it was the night my real life finally began.